Hey, welcome to our very first episode of WonderFix. I'm Pirek and I'll be your host tonight. Since this is the first episode of our little podcast, let me explain how it will work. In the first segment, we will focus on learning more about changes occurring in-game and how they affect it. During our second part, we will pick our special guests' brains by picking up a gear that could use some love and ask them to try to make it work. Speaking of special guests, today I'm joined by Quack. Hi there.
Hello, glad to be here. Honored to be on the first episode, and a lot of you here know me. I love digging into this stuff, and Perek's very excited about going into this, so I'm gonna do my best to be as explanatory as possible while still keeping it fun.
Thank you. Very happy to have you here as well. Okay, so before we dive into all the details of the latest hotfix, tell me, how do you feel about this hotfix overall?
Overwhelmingly positive. There's a lot of cool stuff that happened in this update, whether it's things, weekly occurrences like the featured rollover, but the weapon tuning was a long time coming. A lot of people felt like they wanted SMGs as a weapon category to get some focused attention, and there were a few items you could, I suppose, call less memorable than others that really have a unique place in the game now. And as a builder, I'm spending a lot of time going over these things, and it's just great. Every hotfix that plays out like this one, it creates so many build opportunities, and I'm very happy about it.
Sounds great. So let's look into weekly changes for now. So new featured run involves Parasite and Mike. For those who haven't looked through the patch last week, the healing mushroom boss from the obelisk, it was now renamed to Mike. I know you fight them yesterday. How was the new featured run?
The new featured run is really good because it's bite-sized and it's very relaxed. It's not one of the more stressful ones. Personally, me, Celissa is my nemesis. So anytime I see her, I'm just not having a good day. Last week had Celissa. It was a little more of a attention-demanding run. However, with this week, it's a great time to gear up any of your undergeared characters, as the length of the content isn't very uh, lengthy, and Parasite is very casual boss to tackle and test out your damage on.
Yeah, Parasite was, if I remember well, at the very beginning of the game cycle, was very popular boss to try a new build on, right?
Yeah, Parasite or Lechance are the most popular target for testing purposes against bosses.
Right. We also got our weekly mini events. It's actually like bi-weekly at this point. We got the Armor Up event. As a reminder, during the event, Fate Makers will have an increased chance for armor drops dedicated to their class. Did you get any good drops for this whole week?
I actually got the best amalgam for my spell shot gun build that I've ever had, and it was on the very last day of the previous featured run. I'm super excited about it. I got to take advantage of the obelisk boss from that run dropping the amalgam with the ongoing events, and I managed to get one with 3 in magic bullets for my spell shot. It was very enjoyable.
Oh, it sounds nice. So let's dig into the main part of the hotfix. So before we go into the changes, a lot of commotion about Livewire this week, as issues were addressed in the hotfix, but as we know, the changes cannot be applied now and will be applied in the upcoming patch. How will changes for this gun affect the builds that rely on this weapon?
Okay, so apologies in advance for the wordy answer. This one is going to require a lot of context to tackle in a way that I'll be satisfied with. Essentially, the live wire right now is head and shoulders above the other stat sticks for melee. Stat stick meaning an item that provides you a benefit simply for holding it, whether or not you are actively using that item. Other examples would be Skulldugger pistols. You can get a combination of 2 parts on them that gives you a 40% bonus to melee. Or you could use any crossbolt applying weapon that has melee crossbolts, and shooting that, sticking those into a target, will also give you a melee bonus. However, the live wire is completely passive, except the only limiter is how many times you swing. For those who are unaware, every other melee hit you connect with, an actual swing of your melee weapon, will create an arc of lightning between you, the target you connected with, and nearby enemies. And this scales off of multiple things, but including the melee hit you dealt, how many bullets are remaining in your magazine, which means shooting the live wire to 0 penalizes you. You don't want to shoot the gun, you want to keep it at 1. This is important. And additionally, before this last update, the live wire's melee mechanic counted as gun damage. So it triggered things like Stabbomancer's Executioner Blade Capstone, things like Clawbringer's Oath of Fire bonus element, which made it powerful in its own right. But it also triggered the Stabbomancer's follow-up skill, which was a bonus source of melee damage, non-conventional melee damage, different multiplier, that was proven to be a little bit silly. So the target, and I really like the write-up in the notes on the subject about how the live wire isn't doing a balanced amount based on its item level. The intention of this change to make it more dependent on the live wire itself rather than everything else you've got going on. I like that. I think that's well targeted. So the impact is if you use the live wire before this last update, the chains were gun damage. After this last update, they are melee damage, which means because of the dreaded elephant in the room, math, the numbers that you can get out of a live wire chain are just astronomically higher as a result, and maybe to a point where they should be looked at so that other options are seen as desirable next to the live wire.
Okay, so one way or another, it's gonna be a big change for a lot of builds whenever we get this patch with the live wire changes. So you start to talk about SMGs here, and as we know, I think this is a good week for all of the SMG enjoyers in the chat, because a lot of guns got a nice value increase. How do you feel about those increases there?
I used some of these SMGs before the changes, such as the Heck Waiter is one of my favorite guns in the entire game. It's so satisfying. It's crazy satisfying. I'm happy to see that one get brought even further. There were a couple SMGs that the community didn't really latch onto, not necessarily due to them being bad, just them being unremarkable compared to alternatives. And these changes not only increased some of the damage dealing options for conventional gun builds, but also gave certain items a bit of their own identity, some individual use cases outside of simply number go up. And I think those are well targeted.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's look at the first gun on my list here. Blazing Volley. It received a barrel mod. So how does it affect the gun?
Essentially, the way the part set for this game works is many guns are capable of receiving accessories on the barrel, which are additional parts that in some cases only have a chance to roll, and in some cases are variable. You could end up with 1 accessory, 2 accessory, or 3 accessories. Now, the Blazing Volley was unable to get these, but now that it can, what this translates to is things like a slight increase in damage, a slight increase in status effect damage, a slight increase in melee damage. These are different accessories you can get on different weapons. And in this particular instance, it'll roughly translate to simply more damage on new versions of the gun. This change is not retroactive. This means new ones will have parts that grant more damage.
I think no one will be angry about more damage on their guns. So you mentioned before the Heck Waiter as one of your favorite weapons, and it got changes to secondary fire mode. Is it a buff, nerf? How exactly it changed the weapon?
It'll work out to a decrease for the Heck Waiter's alternate fire mode. However, in all honesty, the alternate fire mode is just, it doesn't have the satisfaction of Big Burr. The alternate fire mode is not fully automatic, whereas on the main fire mode, you have a fire rate of almost 15 on the card, almost 15 bullets per second, and that's exceptional damage. So the issue that was corrected was that the alternate fire mode was not receiving the penalty for its fire mode, and now it's working correctly. It'll do the same damage as the main fire, but at a much lower fire rate.
I see. So let's go to something very spicy, Shadow Fire. Did you test it out? How does it feel?
I'm not familiar with the Shadow Fire. All I know is the Chad-O Fire, because this gun is absolutely insane. It is incredibly rewarding, incredibly satisfying. It already did acceptable damage before the update, but it fell into that category of unremarkable. There weren't many reasons to use a Shadowfire over many other things in the SMG category. But now, due to it having an extremely high base status effect chance along with good damage, you effectively get a guaranteed damage over time on a target. And in Wonderlands, damage over time builds are incredibly powerful. So you get a high consistency with something that's otherwise very random and very hard to plan around without spamming instances of damage as fast as you possibly can. You can just throw one Shadowfire at a target and they will burn.
Now I definitely need to get one. One last gun here from the list, Fragment Rain. What does changing from shotgun to SMG-based damage means for the gun? Because I've seen the card of this gun after the change and I didn't see any difference in the stats.
So this is a bit of a behind-the-scenes change. There are multiple ways that weapons and other items scale in terms of damage. Some of which are seen on the card of the item, some of which aren't. This is a behind-the-scenes change. And trust, the damage did go up. The damage of the Fragment Rain did increase from this change. Effectively, you won't see any change on your card, with the exception of other changes that may or may not affect individual items. But it hits harder now, and the Fragment Rain, for those who might not be aware of its use case, is it ricochets from the first target you hit and deals even more damage to everyone else in the same area code, continent, however you want to illustrate that space. It ricochets very far, goes through walls, clears rooms. It's incredibly powerful.
Sounds good to me. Looks like this hotfix definitely gonna bring more people back in, because there's only like positive things about the guns so far. And all of the SMG. It's good to see guns that weren't used that much before being used now. And this brings us to the second part of our little podcast called Make It Work. So I made myself here a little list of gear I often see mentioned in the community that it's like not something people want to go for, that it's underperforming. And I want to ask you to tell me, how would you make this piece of gear work? Let me just hit here, let's see what is gonna roll. And we got a skip prod. Okay. How are you gonna make skip prod being more viable in the game?
Okay, so I love this item. I'm so glad this came up. The skip prod has a few advantages. It is a sniper rifle, and something that is a bit of a behind-the-scenes bonus is all sniper rifles get a 20% bonus to crit damage. It is a separate multiplier from other crit, so you're starting out at an advantage over everything else unless you have specific other exceptional cases of crit damage. So aim for the head, forehead, if you're a frequenter of my own chat, where my chat roasts me constantly for not being good at that. But that's okay, because your choice of class can also make the skip prod perform even better. You have the Spore Warden's Capstone skill, Play the Angles, effectively acts as indirect ammo efficiency, because shooting one target and hitting a crit has a chance to send another projectile at another nearby target, and that second target will take more damage than the first, because, once again, math. So, if you take the skip prod, hit a bunch of crits with it, you hit multiple targets. But how can we take that further? We can also add the Barboloade, which is a new amulet from the Glutton's Gamble expansion. And what this item does is whenever you deal damage to a target that has crossbolts stuck in it, you have a chance of sending a projectile to another nearby enemy that is based on the damage of what caused the effect. So it's not necessarily what placed the bolts, but in this instance it is. And what that means is we can shoot one enemy with a skip prod, hit a second one with Play the Angles, hit a third one with Barboloade, and that gets around the issue of the skip prod being incredibly ammo hungry. If we can hit 3 enemies for every shot, potentially, that addresses that problem. Now, because that's not enough area damage, we're going to take it one step further. The skip prod's unique effect is that any enemy you have shot with it will connect an arc of lightning between each other, and it has a very long range. So you tag two individual enemies, and they'll start damaging each other along with whatever the actual shots of the weapon are doing. So the ski prod, with all of this tech combined, is exceptionally good at clearing rooms of enemies, as long as you either have good accuracy and hit that crit spot, or you use Stabomancers from the Shadows action skill and just have it do it for you.
So you mentioned a crit damage. Do sniper rifles use the same damage formula as other guns?
So different kinds of weapons have sort of different things going on to give you incentive to use them differently. For example, sniper rifles have that 20% that I mentioned. Hyperius weapons have a hidden crit multiplier on top of that. Black powder has an even bigger one than the Hyperius one. Crossbow barrel weapons, most crossbow barrel weapons, also have a hidden crit multiplier. And Ski Prod ticks several of these boxes. So it just has a great spread of available damage boosts, especially when you hit that crit spot. Can't stress that enough.
Sounds good. That sniper rifle got really good reload time, right? Can you like take more advantage of this like good feature from that gun?
It has a really good reload time, and I shouldn't be ungrateful, but me being a perfectionist, I didn't like having to stop shooting to see my character, move the hand for zero point 0.8 seconds is a long time, right? 0.8 seconds is years. So I stacked enough reload speed that it no longer has a reload animation. If you get enough reload speed on your gear, Ski Prod literally reloads so fast you do not see your character's hands move.
Oh my goodness, I gotta see that. um, okay, one more question about Ski Prod, because the main complaint about this gun is that people dislike ammo consumption on it, since it's like the major downside of this sniper rifles. How do you deal with it?
A combination of making the gun hit multiple targets through the Barboloade amulet and the Play the Angles capstone skill for Spore Warden. But additionally, the Chaos Chamber has altars you can pick up room to room at a steadily increasing cost of crystals. But the first one and the second one are fairly cheap. So you can simply buy the ammo capacity increase, and 1 to 2 provide enough ammunition that you can just use the Ski Prod and only the Ski Prod through your entire Chaos Chamber run with no other weapons needed.
Okay, I don't know about you guys, but I'm definitely convinced. If you want to suggest any piece of gear you want to hear in this part of the podcast, in future podcasts, we're going to prepare a special place on the server where you can submit them. And if you catch up with the show on YouTube, you can leave the comments there to tell us what gear you want to see in the future episodes. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today, Quack, and thank you to everyone who tuned in. It was lovely to have you here.
It's my absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for tuning in to support the server, the community, the show, and y'all are great. Thank you so much for having me. Seriously, it's an honor.
Honor is all mine. So as I said, for those who couldn't be here for this little podcast, we're gonna upload it later on the YouTube channel. We're gonna post links everywhere. Don't worry, you're not gonna miss it. And we're gonna see you next week with another special guest. And until then, keep it chaotic great. Thank you so much.